After 8 months blind, I secretly regained my sight. My daughter-in-law, Serena, didn't know. I watched her measure my windows, try on my grandmother's pearls, and discuss other arrangements for me with my son. They thought I was losing my mind, planning to put me away. I just smiled. Little did they know, their carefully constructed lie was about to unravel. Follow my story. Like and share. And tell me where you're listening from. The world had been a canvas of shifting shadows, a symphony of sounds and textures for 8 long months. Darkness, at first terrifying, then familiar, had become my constant companion. Then, one morning, a sliver of light pierced through the perpetual twilight. It started as a hazy glow, a faint outline, and then, as if a curtain had been slowly drawn back, the vibrant, chaotic beauty of my bedroom materialized before my eyes. My vision had returned. A miracle, certainly. But a dangerous one. A secret weapon I knew. Instinctively, I had to keep hidden. I kept my eyes half closed, my movements practiced, my blank stare perfected. No one noticed. And why would they? They had grown accustomed to the sightless Eleanor, the woman who needed guidance, whose world was touch and sound. This new, seeing Eleanor was an invisible observer, and for the first time in nearly a year, I truly saw. My daughter-in-law, Serena, had always been outwardly solicitous, her voice often dripping with an exaggerated sweetness that, even when blind, had grated on my nerves. Now, with my sight restored, I noticed the subtle shifts, the way her lips would curl into a tight, almost imperceptible smirk when she thought I wasn't listening, or the impatient flick of her wrist when she handed me something. Her words hadn't changed much. But her eyes, previously hidden behind a veil of darkness, now betrayed a flicker of something colder. Something calculating. She had grown subtly complacent, perhaps believing my blindness had dulled my other senses, or simply made me too frail to notice. One afternoon, a hushed conversation drifted from the kitchen. My son Thomas's deep rumble was interspersed with Serena's softer, yet sharper tone. I sat in the living room, a half-finished knitting project in my lap, feigning a serene slumber. Their voices, though lowered, carried clearly in the quiet house. "It's getting to be too much, Thomas," Serena whispered, her voice laced with what was meant to sound like concern, but to my now seeing eyes, was a theatrical performance. "She needs other arrangements. Easier for everyone. Professional care." Thomas mumbled something indistinct, a note of weariness in his tone. "Doctor, Davies thinks her decline is natural, Serena." "Natural, yes, but accelerated, don't you think?" Serena pressed, her voice rising slightly in indignation. "She's having more confused days. And with your travel, and Arthur, it's simply not fair to him." The words struck me with the force of a physical blow. Other arrangements. Professional care. They were talking about putting me away, my own son, my daughter-in-law. Planning my future without me. Without even a pretense of consultation. My heart ached with a pain far sharper than any physical ailment. A few days later, a glint caught my eye. From the corner of my blind gaze, I watched Serena glide into my bedroom. Her movements confident. As if she owned the space, she made a beeline for my dressing table, her fingers easily finding the latch on my antique jewelry box. My breath hitched. It was a cherished heirloom, passed down from my grandmother, then to my mother, and finally to me. Inside, nestled on a velvet cushion, lay my grandmother's pearl necklace. Serena picked it up, her fingers tracing the smooth, lustrous pearls. She held it against her throat, then slipped it on, turning to admire herself in the mirror. A faint smile played on her lips as she adjusted the clasp, her head tilted, assessing how it looked on her. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a legacy, a piece of my very identity, now resting on Serena's unfamiliar skin, a symbol of her encroaching dominance. The audacity, the casual disregard for what was mine, burned within me. The next week brought another unsettling discovery. The sound of a measuring tape extended and retracted repeatedly in the living room. I sat in my usual armchair, a book open on my lap, pretending to be lost in thought. Serena was pacing, a small notepad in her hand. "When we redecorate, we'll need new drapes here," she murmured to herself, her pens scratching against the paper. "And the sofa, definitely not fitting with the new aesthetic. We'll have to replace it." The word "when" echoed ominously in my mind, a chilling certainty that solidified my worst fears. Not if Eleanor leaves, but when. The sheer audacity, the cold planning for my impending absence, made my stomach clench. Later that afternoon, the heavy thud of Arthur's grocery bags heralded his return. My dear Arthur. My steadfast, loving husband, whose exhaustion was now etched deeply onto his face. His shoulders were stooped, his brow furrowed with a weariness that went bone deep. He was my rock, my protector. Yet even he was being unknowingly manipulated. Serena met him at the door, her voice immediately shifting to a tone of practiced sympathy. "Oh, she's had another one of her confused days, Arthur," she announced, before he even had a chance to put down the groceries. She was muttering to herself this morning. Couldn't remember where she put her spectacles, even though they were right on her head. I felt the sting of the carefully chosen words, designed to corrode Arthur's trust, to paint a picture of my rapid decline. The spectacles, by the way, had been on the table, not on my head, and I had simply been testing their attentiveness. No one had noticed my subtle charade. Arthur sighed, rubbing his temples. Perhaps I should call Dr. Davies. He might have some suggestions. Serena was quick to interject, her voice smooth as silk. "Oh, Arthur. Dr. Davies is so busy, and honestly, for something like this, don't you think professional help, perhaps a specialized facility, would be more appropriate? They have staff trained for these things, round-the-clock care. It would be such a relief for you, darling, and safer for Eleanor." The chilling implication of a specialized facility was not lost on me. It was a euphemism, a polite term for a nursing home, a place where the inconvenient elderly were sent to live out their remaining days, out of sight and out of mind. A cold dread settled in my chest. This wasn't just about convenience. It was a systematic campaign. Serena was skillfully, patiently, poisoning my family against me, making them believe I was losing my mind, becoming a burden. She was dismantling my reputation, my sanity, my very right to remain in my own home, the home I had built with Arthur, the home where we had raised our son. Lying in my bed that night, the darkness no longer absolute, Eleanor made a decision. I had seen enough. I had heard enough. I would no longer be a passive observer in my own undoing. I would play Serena's game. But with one crucial difference. She thought I was blind. But I could see everything. My blindness had been a prison, but my secret sight would be my liberation. And perhaps, Serena's undoing. The veil of darkness, once a burden, had become my most potent shield. It allowed me to move through my own home, a phantom observer, while the true shadows began to gather. The morning after my decision to play Serena's game, a new intensity sharpened my senses. I knew she was planning something more insidious than just a facility. I had to confirm it. I waited until Arthur left for his usual morning errands, a short trip to the hardware store for some screws he insisted on replacing himself. Serena, ever the early riser, busied herself with what she called tidying, which often involved rearranging my carefully placed belongings. As soon as I heard the front door close, I feigned a need for the restroom, my movements slow and deliberate, a performance of frailty I had perfected. Instead of heading to the bathroom, I veered slightly towards Arthur's study, my hand trailing along the wall as if for guidance. The door was ajar, a sliver of light spilling out. Peeking through the narrow gap between the door and the frame, my heart clenched. There was Serena, her back to me, hunched over Arthur's large mahogany desk. In her hand, she held her phone, and with the other, She was carefully positioning a document. My eyes, still adjusting to the nuances of sight, focused. It was the house deed. The actual legal document, with our names, our address, the very foundation of our lives, laid bare on the desk. She snapped a picture. Then another. Her voice, low and conspiratorial, reached me as she brought the phone to her ear. Yes, I have it. Just sent you the photos. The market value is excellent. As we discussed, it should be more than enough. A pause, then a sigh, almost a purr of satisfaction. No. He won't be a problem. Arthur trusts Thomas completely. He'd sign anything if Thomas asked him to. We just need to ensure he gets power of attorney soon. Before... She trailed off, glancing towards the hallway where I ostensibly resided. I quickly retreated a step, pressing myself against the wall, straining to listen. Yes, exactly, she continued, a faint smirk visible in her reflection on the glass-fronted bookcase. Eleanor's having more and more confused days. She keeps asking who I am, where she is. It's becoming impossible to manage. Arthur is exhausted. He'll understand it's for her own good, for professional care. The words hit me like a barrage of ice. My home. My legacy. She planned to use it as collateral, to fund my own institutionalization. The brazenness, the sheer cruelty of her scheme, stole my breath. It wasn't just about getting rid of me. It was about stripping me of everything I held dear. She was building a case, fabricating evidence of my supposed mental decline, not just to Arthur, but to some unknown complicit party on the other end of the line. She intended to make Thomas, my own son, the executor of her nefarious plot. Knowing his father's unwavering trust in him, I heard the distant rumble of Arthur's car returning, much earlier than usual. Panic flickered across Serena's face, a rare, unguarded moment. She fumbled, hastily shoving the deed back into a drawer, her movements quick and clumsy. The clatter of it against the wood was loud in the sudden silence of the house. I barely had time to stumble back to my armchair, resuming my blank stare, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. Arthur's key turned in the lock. He entered, bags in hand, his brow furrowed with the usual weariness. "Eleanor, darling, I'm back," he called out, his voice gentle. Serena was beside him instantly, a picture of sympathetic concern. "Oh, Arthur. Thank goodness you're here." She's been quite disoriented today. Earlier, she looked at me right in the face and asked, "Who are you, dear? Is this your house?" My heart just broke for her. She shook her head sadly, looking at me with feigned pity, then back to Arthur, her eyes pleading. I kept my gaze unfocused, my mouth slightly agape, breathing slowly as if lost in a fog. The lie was a sharp knife to my spirit, but I couldn't flinch. I had to let her believe it. I had to sell the performance of a woman losing her grip on reality. Arthur's face clouded with fresh worry. Did she now? Oh, my poor Eleanor. He came over and patted my hand, his touch heavy with sorrow. The sting of his concern, based on Serena's poisonous words, was almost unbearable. Over the next few days, I perfected my act. My steps were a little more tentative, my responses a little slower, my gaze always just slightly off. I would misplace things Serena had deliberately moved, then find them with a relieved childish cry. Each performance fueled Serena's conviction that her plan was working flawlessly. She grew bolder, more openly possessive. From my blind vantage point, I watched her like a hawk. Her phone was a constant companion, her fingers flying across the screen, texting furiously. Often, she would move through the house, pausing to take pictures of our antique silver set, the porcelain figurines from my grandmother's collection, the oil paintings that adorned our walls. Each flash of her camera was a stab to my heart, a further inventory of what she intended to plunder. She wasn't just planning to put me away. She was preparing to strip our home bare. The aroma of Arthur's famous chicken pot pie filled the house as Thomas arrived for lunch. He was a good son, earnest and devoted, but easily swayed by Serena's smooth words. She had a way of framing her manipulations as concern, her selfishness as practicality. "Mum's been having a really difficult week, Thomas," Serena began, as soon as we were all seated at the dining table, me at the head, feigning mild confusion over which fork to use. So many moments of confusion. Arthur's just worn to a frazzle trying to keep up. "I've been reading about some wonderful facilities, places with staff specifically trained for cognitive decline. They offer such dignity, you know, and specialized activities." She cast a sympathetic glance at me, her smile tight. "It's becoming clear she needs more than we can provide at home. It's heartbreaking, of course, but for her own safety and well-being." Thomas looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and what I now recognized as a carefully cultivated doubt. He loved me, I knew. But Serena's constant drip-feed of evidence was eroding his trust in my mind, making him receptive to her insidious suggestions. I continued to chew slowly, my gaze drifting somewhere beyond the window, maintaining the illusion of a mind lost in its own labyrinth. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken agreement and the taste of betrayal. The web of Serena's deception was tightening, thread by insidious thread. My feigned blindness and disorientation had given me a front-row seat to the dismantling of my own life, piece by agonizing piece. Each fabricated memory lapse, each whispered concern to Arthur and Thomas, was a deliberate chip at the foundation of my sanity. Now, it was clear her ambitions stretched far beyond just getting me out of the house. One evening, Arthur had taken a rare moment to himself, retreating to his shed to tinker with some old tools, a ritual that often brought him peace. Thomas had gone home after his usual evening check-in, still looking pensive after Serena's lunchtime performance. This left Serena alone, or so she thought, in the living room. I sat in my usual armchair, a blanket draped over my lap, my eyes closed, appearing to be in a deep, peaceful sleep. My ears, however, were acutely tuned. Her voice, barely a whisper, floated from the other side of the room. "Yes, Thomas is almost completely on board. He's starting to see the logic in professional care. It's Arthur who's the problem. Still stubborn about his promise to Eleanor. You know, that silly vow he made never to put her in a home." There was a note of irritation in her tone, a harshness I hadn't heard before, now unleashed in the privacy she believed she enjoyed. "But I'm building a strong case," she continued, her voice regaining its confident edge. "Enough documentation of her decline. By next month, we should have everything we need to justify the move. Once she's in, it'll be simple. We get the power of attorney transferred to Thomas, and then we can make the financial decisions. It's all very straightforward." A cold, sickening dread washed over me. Financial decisions. The phrase hung in the air like a poisonous mist. It wasn't just my house she was after. It was everything. Our life savings, painstakingly accumulated over decades of hard work. Arthur's pension. His only guaranteed income. Our carefully managed investments, intended for our golden years, for our children's future, for our grandchildren. She planned to seize it all. Then came a sound that chilled me to the bone. A soft, self-satisfied chuckle. "By Christmas," Serena declared, her voice laced with chilling triumph. "This will all be resolved. Christmas. The season of family, of warmth, of joy." To her, it was a deadline for my complete erasure, a date by which I would be removed, rendered irrelevant, and my family's financial security stripped away. A tidal wave of rage surged through me, so potent it threatened to shatter my carefully constructed facade of frailty. My hands clenched beneath the blanket, nails digging into my palms, my jaw tightened, a tremor running through my body. To think she could so calmly, so callously, plot to destroy my life. my husband's peace of mind, and my son's future, all for her own gain. It was beyond comprehension, but the rage, though fierce, was quickly tempered by a colder, harder emotion, an unyielding determination. I would not let her win. I would not allow her to turn my family against me, to steal our legacy, to cast me aside. I realized then that Serena wasn't just spinning lies. She was meticulously building a legal case. Enough documentation of her decline. She was gathering evidence, twisting everyday occurrences, fabricating incidents, all to prove my incompetence. And who was she talking to? An attorney? A real estate agent? Someone who was advising her on the legal intricacies of gaining power of attorney, of using our assets as collateral, of securing my place in a facility. This wasn't just a desperate daughter-in-law. This was a calculating, ruthless operator. The thought of someone helping her, guiding her through this deceitful maze, only intensified my resolve. If she was building a case, then so would I. My evidence, however, would be the undeniable truth. I spent the rest of the evening, and the days that followed, not just playing my role, but absorbing every detail around me. My sight, once a sudden gift, now became my most crucial tool. I started to catalog everything, every subtle glance, every hurried whisper, every misplaced item, every moment Serena believed she was unobserved. This was the first phase of my counterattack. Careful, meticulous observation. I noticed how Serena would leave her phone on the kitchen counter, screen up, when she went to the restroom. I saw the stream of notifications, the names of contacts she texted most frequently. A name I didn't recognize, Mr. Davies, not our family doctor, but perhaps a lawyer. And a contact simply labeled Facility Coordinator. Each name was a piece of the puzzle, a thread in her web. I observed her routine, her habit of checking Arthur's mail when he wasn't looking, her quick glances through bank statements, her detailed conversations on the phone, always spoken in hushed tones, often about assets and valuations. She was relentless, leaving no stone unturned in her quest for control. I started making mental notes. The date and time of her phone calls, the specific items she photographed, the time she lied about my confusion to Arthur. I began to associate these details with her broader plan, seeing how each small manipulation contributed to her larger objective. It was a terrifying education, but it was essential. My days were now a careful dance between deception and discovery. I would drift through the house, a shadow of my former self, occasionally bumping into furniture, asking repetitive questions, allowing my gaze to wander blankly. But beneath that vacant exterior, my mind was sharp, my eyes were open, and my resolve was hardening with every passing moment. Serena was building a case to prove I was losing my mind, but I was building a case to prove she was a thief. And by Christmas, one of us would be resolved. The meticulous observation had become a suffocating routine, each discovery a fresh sting. Yet, nothing could have prepared me for the scene that unfolded a few days later. It was late afternoon, the house quiet save for the gentle hum of the refrigerator. I was in the kitchen, carefully fumbling with a teacup, ensuring my movements were clumsy and slow, the very picture of an elderly woman struggling with simple tasks. My ears, however, were straining, listening to the soft murmur of voices from the living room. Serena's voice, usually saccharine or sharp, had taken on a new, unsettling quality, soft, sultry, almost a purr. And Arthur's responses, usually so clear and forthright, were hesitant, laced with an unfamiliar discomfort. I crept closer to the archway connecting the kitchen to the living room, peeking through the narrow gap. My breath caught in my throat. Serena was on the couch, intimately close to Arthur. Her body was angled towards him, her thigh brushing his, and her hand rested lightly, almost possessively, on his arm. It was an image that twisted my gut. "You look so tired, Arthur," she murmured, her voice a low, sympathetic hum. "Who truly takes care of you? Who sees the burden you carry?" "Eleanor." "She doesn't really see anything anymore, does she?" Not really. Her eyes, full of a predatory pity, flickered towards the kitchen, towards my blind presence, a calculated jab. Arthur shifted, a nervous energy radiating from him. I'm fine, Serena. Just a long day. She stood up, moving smoothly behind him, her hands reaching out to his shoulders. Just let me help you relax, she whispered, her fingers beginning to knead the tense muscles of his neck and shoulders. Her touch was intimate, deliberate. I watched, my blood turning to ice, as Arthur stiffened, his head leaning slightly away from her. Thomas won't be home until late, she continued, her voice lower now, almost a conspiratorial whisper. And Eleanor, well, she's having one of her difficult days, isn't she? Lost in her own world. We have our privacy. The implication was clear, heavy with suggestion. Arthur, though he was visibly uncomfortable, didn't immediately pull away. My heart was a stone in my chest. He was a good man, a loyal man. Was he truly so oblivious to her intentions? Or worse, was he receptive? Finally, he spoke, his voice strained, a raw edge of discomfort in his tone. Serena, this isn't appropriate. He tried to move, to pull away from her touch, but she was persistent, her hands continuing their unwelcome massage. She then moved from behind him, gracefully sinking onto the couch directly facing him, her knees almost touching his. Her gaze was direct, intense, holding his. Arthur, you deserve more than this endless burden. You've given so much for so long. Leona? She paused, letting my name hang in the air like a forgotten relic. Leona needs constant care, but you need companionship, a life free from being a caregiver. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a seductive whisper. I could make you feel alive again. What Leona can't anymore. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. What Leona can't anymore. My own daughter-in-law, suggesting an intimate betrayal, a violation of my marriage, under my very roof, while I was supposedly blind and incapacitated. It was a depth of depravity I hadn't imagined. Not content with stealing our home and our money, she wanted to steal my husband's affection, to dismantle the very core of our shared life. Arthur's reaction was slow, his eyes wide, clearly startled by her brazenness. His gaze flickered towards the kitchen, as if sensing my presence, but he quickly averted it. That's a generous offer, Serena. He finally managed, his voice hoarse. But I need time to think about it. Time to think about it. The words echoed in my head, a jarring, sickening refrain. He didn't outright reject her. He didn't express outrage or disgust. He said he needed time to think. My world, already tilted on its axis by Serena's financial schemes, now spun violently out of control. A profound sense of betrayal washed over me, raw and devastating. This was worse than the theft of possessions. This was a violation of trust, of love, of the sacred bond Arthur and I shared. Was he truly considering it? Had Serena's constant care and her insidious whispers of my decline worn him down so much that he was vulnerable to her predatory advances? Could the man who had promised to stand by me, who had cherished me for decades, actually entertain the idea of another woman, especially his own daughter-in-law, in such a way? The thought was a venomous dart, piercing through my heart. My carefully constructed resolve to fight Serena wavered, threatened by this unexpected blow. How could I trust my husband, if he could even for a moment consider such a betrayal? The image of Serena's hand on his arm, her body pressed close, her words dripping with poisoned seduction, seared itself into my mind. The pain was unbearable. My legs felt weak. The teacup I was fumbling with threatened to slip from my fingers. I retreated, carefully, silently, back into the kitchen, leaning against the cold counter, trying to regain my breath, to process the devastating scene I had just witnessed. The fight against Serena had just become infinitely more complicated, and infinitely more personal. If you're captivated by Eleanor's battle against betrayal, don't miss a single moment of her unfolding story. Keep watching to see how she navigates this treacherous path. Remember to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to stay updated on all our compelling narratives. The image of Serena's hand on Arthur's arm, her seductive whispers, and most agonizingly, Arthur's hesitant "I need time to think about it," replayed in my mind like a cruel loop. I lay in bed, feigning sleep, the darkness pressing in around me, amplifying the feeling of profound isolation. Had I misjudged him so completely? Was the man I had loved and trusted for 50 years truly capable of such a weakness? Such a betrayal? Especially with our son's wife? The thought was a bitter poison, burning through my veins. After what felt like an eternity, Arthur finally joined me in bed. He lay stiffly beside me, his usual warmth absent, replaced by a palpable tension. After a long silence, his voice, low and hesitant, broke the quiet. "Leona, my darling, just hypothetically," he began. If I couldn't care for you anymore, truly couldn't, what would you want? What would you do?" My heart pounded. This wasn't hypothetical. This was Serena's narrative taking root. But I knew what I had to say. I turned slightly towards him, my blind gaze fixed on the ceiling, my voice firm despite the tremor in my soul. "Arthur, you know the answer to that. This is our home. It's where we built our lives. It's where I belong. I would never want to leave." I paused, letting my words sink in, then added, "It's where I want to stay, no matter what." There was a subtle shift in his breathing, a slight tightening of his jaw that I could sense even without seeing. Guilt. He felt guilty. That at least was a small comfort, a sign that perhaps his conscience was still intact. Sleep, when it finally came, was fitful and fleeting. Sometime in the deep hours of the night, a soft mumble stirred me from my troubled slumber. Arthur, beside me, was restless. "No, can't do that to Leona," he muttered, his voice thick with sleep. "Can't." A flicker. A tiny, fragile spark of hope ignited within me. "Can't do that to Leona." Not won't, but can't. It implied a struggle, a fight against temptation, not an embrace of it. Perhaps he wasn't truly tempted by Serena's vile proposition, but rather battling against her insidious influence, against the pressure she was undoubtedly exerting on him. Perhaps he was stronger than I had feared. The next morning, as I sat in the living room, a cup of lukewarm tea in my hand, I overheard Arthur's voice from his study, low and guarded. "Mr. Harrison," he said, his tone firmer than I had heard in weeks. "Yes, everything is proceeding. I have everything on tape, including that incident yesterday. Her blatant attempt to get me to betray my wife. It's all there." My teacup clattered against the saucer, a small, involuntary sound that was quickly swallowed by the silence. Mr. Harrison. Not a family friend, not a doctor, but a private investigator. The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave. Arthur hadn't been weakened by Serena. He had been investigating her. He hadn't been considering her offer. He had been gathering evidence of her seduction attempt. A wave of profound relief washed over me, so potent it made my knees weak. The shame, the betrayal, the crushing isolation I had felt evaporated in an instant, replaced by an overwhelming sense of vindication and gratitude. He hadn't betrayed me. He had been protecting me, silently, meticulously, all along. I listened with bated breath, my eyes now openly fixed on the study door. She even had the audacity to suggest I update my will. Arthur continued, a note of controlled fury in his voice. To ensure Eleanor's care. If something were to happen to me, the gall of her. That just confirms her full intent. My mind raced, connecting the dots. Serena's suggestion for him to update his will, disguised as concern for my future, was a chilling confirmation of her escalating desperation, her hunger for control not just over our assets, but over our very lives and legacies. She wasn't just planning to put me away. She was orchestrating a complete takeover. Arthur, my Arthur, had seen through it all. He had played along, endured her manipulative advances, and listened to her venomous whispers, all while secretly building a case against her. He was conducting a full, silent investigation, a testament to his unwavering loyalty and his deep love for me. He had allowed himself to be seen as worn down, as susceptible, to bait Serena into revealing the full extent of her greed and deceit. Tears pricked at my eyes, but these were tears of immense relief and profound love. All this time, I had felt so alone in my fight, but Arthur had been right there beside me, shielding me in ways I hadn't even imagined. He hadn't succumbed to her. He was letting her dig her own grave, and he was carefully documenting every shovelful of dirt. My heart swelled with renewed determination. We were a team, as we always had been. Serena thought she was playing an old, blind woman and her weary husband. She had no idea she was up against two seasoned players, one with sight, and the other with a silent, iron resolve. The game was about to change. The profound relief of discovering Arthur's secret investigation had been a powerful balm, soothing the sting of perceived betrayal. My initial heartbreak had transformed into a surge of admiration and renewed faith. He hadn't been weak. He had been brilliant, playing a longer, more dangerous game than Serena could ever fathom. He had been safeguarding our future, not just mine, but our collective legacy. All while enduring her vile machinations. Now, with both of us secretly armed, the dynamic shifted. The prey was about to become the hunter. Serena, oblivious to the impending trap, arrived that afternoon, her energy crackling with a new, aggressive urgency. Thomas was with her, his face a canvas of conflicting emotions, weary concern for me, but also a growing tension as he became a pawn in Serena's escalating game. The moment they stepped into the living room, Serena launched into her offensive. "Arthur, Thomas, we need to talk about Eleanor's immediate care," she declared. Her voice sharp, devoid of its usual syrupy sweetness. She gestured towards me, where I sat, a picture of vacant contemplation, ostensibly lost in the textures of my blanket. "This simply can't go on. It's not fair to anyone. Least of all, Eleanor." Thomas settled onto the edge of a chair, his gaze drifting from his mother to his wife. His discomfort was palpable. Serena, however, was relentless. "This morning, she didn't even recognize Arthur," she announced, spinning another of her carefully crafted lies. She asked him, "Are you the new helper?" My heart just sank. It's truly heartbreaking to watch her decline so rapidly. I held my breath, my mind screaming in silent protest at the blatant falsehood. Arthur, bless his stoic heart, simply nodded slowly, his face grim, playing his part perfectly. Thomas, however, winced, his brow furrowing deeper. "She did?" he asked, his voice laced with genuine pain. He loved me, I knew, and the thought of his mother not recognizing his father must have been agonizing. He was clearly being swayed. The constant drip-feed of Serena's lies finally eroding his resistance. The idea of specialized care, presented as a merciful solution, was starting to take hold. Serena pressed her advantage. "Yes, Thomas. And it's only going to get worse. I've been in touch with the facility coordinator again. The good news is, they have an opening. By Thursday, they can take Eleanor. All the admission papers are ready." She pulled a folder from her large handbag, its contents rustling ominously. "All we need are the signatures. Thursday. So soon." The trap was closing, the jaws of her plan about to snap shut. "Once she's settled," Serena continued, her voice softening slightly, a predatory gleam in her eyes, "getting the legal guardianship arranged will be straightforward. And then, the financial decisions can be made. It will simplify everything for you, Arthur, and for Thomas." She was laying it all bare now, confident in her victory. The guardianship, the financial control. It was all part of the same chilling agenda. Then came the final, brutal blow. "I've already contacted a realtor," Serena announced, a triumphant note entering her voice. She glanced around the living room, her eyes assessing, calculating. "This house is far too big for Arthur alone, especially with all the maintenance. We'll sell it, get him into a lovely modern condo. Something low maintenance. He deserves a break, don't you think? My home. Not just my place, but Arthur's place, our sanctuary." She was planning to dismantle it, sell it off, and relegate Arthur to a condo, further isolating him, further cementing her control. The brazenness of it was breathtaking. She was not just removing me. She was erasing our entire existence here. Thomas finally spoke, his voice tentative, laced with discomfort. "Serena, I'm not sure about selling the house so quickly. And moving Mum by Thursday? We haven't even had a full discussion with Dad about all of this." He looked at Arthur. A silent plea for guidance, for a sign of resistance. But Arthur, the consummate actor, maintained his weary, defeated posture. He simply sighed, looking at his hands. Serena, however, was quick to dismiss Thomas's hesitation, her composure momentarily cracking, revealing a flash of impatience. "Thomas, honestly, your father is in denial. He loves your mother, of course, but he simply can't see the reality of her condition. This isn't a discussion. It's a necessity. We have to act for her own good before something irreversible happens." Her words twisted concern into an accusation, making Arthur's resistance seem like a failing. I felt a fresh wave of heartbreak. Serena was convincing my son, my own flesh and blood, that his mother was permanently lost, that her mind was gone, that she was a shell of her former self, and that removing her was an act of mercy. He loved me, I knew, but her relentless barrage of manufactured evidence and emotional manipulation was slowly, systematically, eroding his connection to me, replacing it with pity and a pragmatic acceptance of her ruthless plan. He was losing his mother, not to illness, but to Serena's insidious lies. The pain of that realization was almost unbearable, a wound deeper than any physical ailment. But it only solidified my resolve. The time for silent observation was over. The trap was set. Now, it was time to spring it. The air in the house was thick with unspoken tension after Serena and Thomas left, leaving behind the chilling scent of betrayal and the looming deadline of Thursday. I retreated to my room, the silence a stark contrast to the cacophony of fear and determination raging within me. The revelation of Arthur's secret investigation had been a profound comfort, but it also meant he had witnessed and endured Serena's manipulations for far longer than I had known. The weight of his burden, his silent suffering for my sake, pressed heavily on my heart. That evening, our weekly ritual of Chinese takeout commenced. It was a tradition we had maintained throughout my blind period, a small anchor of normalcy in a rapidly destabilizing world. The familiar aroma of ginger and soy sauce filled the kitchen, a welcome distraction from the sinister plans brewing in our home. Arthur placed the containers carefully on the table, guiding my hand to the chopsticks, all part of our well-rehearsed charade. But tonight, something was different. The silence between us, usually companionable, was charged with unspoken truths. As I fumbled with a spring roll, I decided it was time. I needed to know, to truly understand the depth of his knowledge, to confirm his unwavering commitment. Taking a tentative breath, I risked a question, keeping my voice light, as if a fleeting thought had just crossed my confused mind. "Arthur, darling," I began, my voice soft. Do you feel Serena has been different lately? Just a feeling, you know. As if something is not quite right." His hand, which had been reaching for a prawn cracker, paused midair. He put it down, then gently, deliberately, reached across the table and took my hand in his. His touch was firm, reassuring, full of an unspoken understanding. My heart leaped. His gaze met mine, clear and unwavering, cutting through the pretense of my blindness. "Eleanor," he said, his voice low, steady. "I know about Serena." The words hit me with the force of a confession and a liberation all at once. My breath hitched. He knew. He truly knew. For a moment, the meticulous performance of blindness shattered. My eyes, wide and startled, stared directly into his, forgetting entirely the need for my vacant, unfocused gaze. The surprise must have shown on my face, but he simply squeezed my hand, a silent acknowledgement of my seeing. "You know?" I whispered, the question laced with a mixture of shock and desperate hope. "How much?" He let out a long, weary sigh, his grip on my hand tightening. "Everything, Leona. For weeks now. Her schemes, her lies, her constant pushing for you to go into a facility. I've known it all." My mind reeled. Weeks. He had known for weeks. This wasn't a recent revelation for him, but a sustained, agonizing ordeal. "Then why, Arthur?" I asked, the words tumbling out, raw with emotion. "Why didn't you stop her? Why let her continue?" His gaze was intense, full of a quiet strength. "Because, my love, a cunning spider like Serena can't just be swatted away. She spins webs of lies, perfectly plausible, designed to look like concern. If I had confronted her prematurely, she would have simply denied everything, played the victim, and twisted it back on us. We would have had no concrete proof, nothing that would stand up in court. She's too clever for that. I needed undeniable, court-worthy evidence. To fully expose her true intentions, I had to let her believe she was succeeding." Then, his eyes softened, a flicker of pain in their depths. "And Leona," he said, his voice dropping to an almost inaudible whisper, "I saw you in the kitchen on Friday night. I knew you saw her. With me. My heart broke for you, having to witness that." My breath caught. He knew I had seen that horrifying scene. He knew the anguish it had caused me, the doubt it had sown. And yet, he had continued his charade, enduring her unwanted advances, all for the sake of our plan. The weight of his sacrifice, the emotional toll it must have taken, was immense. He squeezed my hand again, pulling me gently back to the present. "I had to let her believe her plan was working, Leona. I had to let her dig her own grave. She thinks she's got us cornered, but she's walking right into our trap." His gaze was unwavering, his sincerity absolute. "Please, my darling, trust me completely. My faithfulness to you has never wavered, not for a single second. Everything I've done has been to protect you and our life together." In that moment, everything coalesced. The strange conversations, the knowing glances he had given me, the weary acceptance of Serena's lies. It wasn't weakness, but a profound, painful performance. He had been playing his role with as much courage and conviction as I had played mine. He had endured the indignity, the emotional abuse, the constant threat of losing everything, all to build an undeniable case against the woman who sought to destroy us. I finally comprehended the full, agonizing weight of Arthur's long-term, painful deception. The isolation he must have felt, unable to confide in me, knowing I was also suffering. But now, in this quiet moment over Chinese takeout, the truth had finally been spoken, and the burden was shared. We were in this together, a united front, armed with knowledge and a shared resolve. The game was no longer mine to play alone. It was ours, and Serena had no idea what was coming. The revelation of Arthur's secret had transformed our shared burden into a unified resolve. The last few days had been a flurry of whispered conversations, meticulous planning, and a renewed sense of purpose. Serena had scheduled a family meeting for Thursday, the day she intended to have me admitted to Willowbrook. She thought it would be her triumph. We knew it would be her downfall. After dinner, we sat in the quiet of the living room, the takeout containers cleared away, the air still heavy with the lingering scent of our shared meal. Our plan for the impending confrontation was finalized, each detail meticulously considered. "I visited Willowbrook yesterday, Leona," Arthur began, his voice grim, a stark contrast to his earlier play acting. "Not just a casual visit, but a deep dive into their policies. And it's exactly as we suspected. Their admission policy, particularly for long-term care, is predatory. They require full control over the patient's major assets, sometimes even seizing property as collateral upon admission." He shook his head, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "It's a legal loophole that Serena obviously planned to exploit. Our house, our savings, all of it would have been gone." A cold dread coiled in my stomach, confirming my earlier suspicions. She wasn't just going to use the house as collateral. She was planning a complete financial absorption. "And that's not all," Arthur continued, his voice hardening. "I also uncovered her preliminary paperwork with Willowbrook. Fraudulent, through and through. She named herself and Thomas as your primary contacts, your guardians even, without our knowledge or consent. It's a complete fabrication designed to cut us both out of the decision-making process." The audacity of her deceit was truly breathtaking. To forge legal documents, to assume guardianship, all under the guise of concern. This wasn't just greed, it was outright criminality. "So, here's how we'll play it," Arthur said, his gaze firm, meeting my own. "We let her present her case. We let her believe she has won. I'll feign confusion, a bit of overwhelm, and then we destroy her. We expose every lie, every manipulation, every piece of her calculated deceit." He paused, then added, his voice filled with a quiet confidence. "Mr. Harrison has been invaluable. Every phone call, every text, every seduction attempt, every conversation about our assets and your decline, it's all documented. Photos, recordings, timestamps, everything we need to prove her malicious intent in a court of law." The thought of Mr. Harrison, a silent, invisible shadow, documenting Serena's every move, brought a perverse satisfaction. She thought she was so clever, so unobserved. She was about to learn the true meaning of surveillance. Thursday arrived, carrying with it an electric tension. The family meeting was set for 3 o'clock. Serena, radiating an almost smug confidence, had arrived early, spreading out the Willowbrook admission papers on the dining table, a tableau of her perceived victory. Thomas, looking more nervous than ever, sat beside her, his discomfort palpable. I sat in my usual place, slightly disoriented, my gaze unfocused. But inside, my mind was a steel trap, ready to spring. Serena began her presentation, her voice smooth and practiced, detailing my rapid decline, the necessity of professional care, and the wonderful amenities of Willowbrook. She painted a picture of herself as the tireless, selfless caregiver, making difficult decisions for my own good. She held up the admission papers, her smile triumphant. "All we need are your signatures, Arthur, and Eleanor will be settled in by dinner." Arthur, playing his part to perfection, looked overwhelmed, his face a mask of weary resignation. He sighed deeply, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Serena, this is all very sudden. So much information." He picked up the Willowbrook brochure, his blind gaze wandering over it. "You seem to know so much about this facility. And these financial details. You've been quite thorough." Serena's triumphant smile faltered slightly. "Well, of course, Arthur. Someone has to be. You've been so busy with everything." Arthur nodded slowly. "Yes, I have been busy. But I find myself wondering, how did you learn so much about Willowbrook's specific financial policies? The way they handle assets, for example? It's quite detailed. And how did you come to know so much about our family finances, enough to make these preliminary arrangements?" His voice was mild, almost hesitant, but each question was a precisely aimed arrow, designed to pierce her facade. Serena hesitated, a flicker of unease in her eyes. Her smooth composure began to crack. I did my research, Arthur. For Eleanor's sake and the family finances. I've simply been trying to help manage things. Her voice was a little too quick, a little too defensive. She was struggling, caught in his seemingly innocent trap. Just then, the front door opened, and Thomas walked in, as planned. He looked from his mother, visibly flustered, to Arthur, whose calm demeanor belied the interrogation he was conducting. Thomas had walked into a scene of uncomfortable cross-examination, not the easy acceptance Serena had envisioned. Arthur straightened in his chair, his weary act beginning to slip, replaced by a steely glint in his eyes. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder, holding it up for Serena to see. The red light indicating it was on pulsed steadily. "Serena," he said, his voice now devoid of any pretense, clear and resonant. "I think it's time we had a truly honest conversation. Don't you?" Serena's eyes widened, her face draining of color. The color of triumph had been replaced by the pallor of fear. The trap had sprung. The click of the digital recorder in Arthur's hand resonated through the dining room, a tiny sound that amplified the sudden, deafening silence. Serena's triumphant smile had vanished, replaced by a mask of stark terror. Her eyes, wide and darting, flickered between Arthur's steely gaze and the innocuous black device. Thomas, still standing by the door, looked utterly bewildered, sensing the dramatic shift in atmosphere but not yet understanding its cause. "I think it's time we had a truly honest conversation, Serena," Arthur repeated, his voice calm, yet edged with an authority I hadn't heard in years. He pressed a button, and the small device whirred to life. A distorted, hushed voice filled the room, Serena's own, whispering, "Yes, Thomas is almost completely on board. It's Arthur who's the problem. That silly vow he made never to put her in a home. Enough documentation of her decline. By next month, we should have everything. Once she's in, it'll be simple. We get the power of attorney transferred. Then we can make the financial decisions. By Christmas, this will all be resolved." The recording played snippets, fragments of her insidious planning, each word a hammer blow to her carefully constructed facade. Then came a section, chillingly clear, of her seductive voice with Arthur. "Leona doesn't really see anything anymore, does she? I could make you feel alive again, what Leona can't anymore." Followed by her triumphant pronouncement to Thomas, "I've already contacted a realtor. This house is far too big for Arthur alone. Get him into a lovely, modern condo." Thomas's face, which had slowly been turning white with shock, now contorted into a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. He looked at Serena, then at me, then back at his wife, his eyes wide with a dawning comprehension of her true, cruel intentions. The color had drained from his face, leaving it ashen. Serena gasped, her composure utterly shattered. "Arthur, what is this? It's taken out of context. You're twisting my words." Her voice was high-pitched, frantic, a stark contrast to her earlier calm confidence. Her carefully constructed world was crumbling before our eyes. Then I spoke. My voice, usually soft and gentle, was clear and firm, cutting through Serena's panicked explanations. "No, Serena," I said, rising slowly from my chair. My movements were no longer hesitant. My gaze was direct, piercing, locking onto her terrified eyes. "Nothing is being twisted. And for the record, I haven't been blind for over 2 months." The confession hung in the air, a final, devastating blow. Thomas gasped, his head snapping towards me, his mouth agape. Serena's jaw dropped, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and utter defeat. She stared at me, the blind woman, now standing tall and seeing, the full implication of my deception finally dawning on her. I reached into the folder I had strategically placed beside my chair, a twin to the one Serena had brought. I pulled out my own stack of photographs. "Here, Serena," I said, my voice unwavering. This is you, rummaging through my jewelry box, trying on my grandmother's pearls. This is you, taking pictures of our antique silver, our paintings, cataloging what you intended to steal. And this, I held up a particularly damning image, is you, trying to access Arthur's safe in his study. The color that had drained from Thomas's face was now replaced by a burning, cold fury. He took a step toward Serena, his hands clenched into fists. "Get out!" he roared, his voice trembling with rage, a visceral disgust evident in every syllable. "Get out of this house. Get out of our lives, and don't you ever come back." Serena, her eyes flashing with a venomous hatred, finally shed her last pretense. "Fine," she shrieked, her voice raw. "Fine. But don't think you're getting rid of me that easily, Thomas. I'll take half of everything you own in the divorce. You'll regret this." The mask was off, revealing the true monster beneath. Arthur, who had remained calm through the outburst, now stepped forward. "Serena," he said, his voice flat, emotionless. "There won't be a divorce battle. Not one where you can take anything. Because, you see, Mr. Harrison has been very thorough. His final report, which is sitting with the police as we speak, details not just your actions here, but also your past." He held up another document, a thick file. "Identity theft, Serena. Credit card fraud. Against elderly clients at your previous job. It seems this wasn't your first attempt to exploit the vulnerable." Serena froze, her face turning an ashen gray. Her threats died on her lips. The fight drained out of her, replaced by a chilling stillness. "So, here's your choice," Arthur continued, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. "You can disappear quietly. Walk out of this house, out of our lives, and never return. Or, you can face legal prosecution for all your crimes. The choice is yours. But know this, if you choose the latter, you will lose everything, including your freedom." Serena stared at him, then at Thomas, then at me, her eyes filled with a desperate, defeated hatred. Without another word, she turned and walked out of our dining room, out of our house, and out of our lives forever. The heavy thud of the front door closing behind her was the sound of a nightmare ending. Thomas crumpled into a chair, burying his face in his hands, racked with shame and guilt. "Oh, Mom, Dad," he choked out. "I am so sorry. How could I have been so blind? How could I have let her do this to you?" Eleanor and Arthur went to him, embracing their son. "It's not your fault, Thomas," I said, my voice soft, tears finally streaming down my face. But these were tears of relief and love. She was a master manipulator. She played on your love for us, your concern. You have a good heart, son. That's why you were vulnerable. 6 months later, life had slowly, painstakingly, begun to heal. Thomas's divorce was finalized, the financial implications minimal thanks to Arthur's meticulous work and Mr. Harrison's evidence. Our family, though scarred, was stronger, more united than ever. We had faced a profound betrayal and emerged victorious. And as for my vision, it was perfect. I could see everything, clearer than ever before.